Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to Constructive. I've got a special guest with me, someone I'm actually working with at the same company. Rebeca Gomez is here. Introduce yourself a little bit if you don't mind. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Hi, Seth. Thank you for having me. I'm Rebeca Gomez. I am a senior manager at InnoActive Group, and that's where Seth and I are working nowadays. I am a product manager, and right now in the project that I'm working on, I'm acting as subject matter expert on digital twins, and I believe that that's one of the topics that Seth wants to touch on today. My background is actually in civil engineering. I studied civil engineering in college and I got a master's in civil engineering and a PhD in civil engineering. But I started exploring more of the automation side of things. On my PhD, I actually used artificial neural networks for to run the case study of my PhD dissertation. And that was a super cool topic. And I think that's something that stuck with me, even though I never worked on the topic in particular that I did my dissertation on, which was automation of container terminals. The shipping container terminals is a topic that is applicable across industries. So it's always stuck with me.
That's so cool. Yeah, my main topic that I'm excited to chat with you about is digital twins because a lot of people are talking about them, but I don't hear a lot of people give super specific answers to questions. So sometimes I think it's just a fun term for people to say, and I want to get into a little bit of what it actually means to someone who's using one for a client. So maybe let's just dig right in from the beginning. Like, how would you define a digital twin?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. And honestly, there is, depending on who you talk to, they'll give you a different answer. The Digital Twin Consortium they have coined a definition for what a digital twin is, but I don't think it really resonates with a lot of people based on the conversations I've had. And maybe instead of defining what a digital twin is, maybe I can tell you what it does and how you can leverage it. So I
Love it.
think perfect. So a digital twin should help you have a very clear understanding of what's happening on your job site, on your facility, on your infrastructure. It should serve as the central command and control room. The thing that is beautiful about digital twins, or the thing that should be beautiful about a properly designed and implemented digital twin, is that it serves as a central source of truth. And what that means is that a digital twin can be the most useful when you actually remove silos across your systems and you connect all the systems to the digital twin, and then the digital twin conveys all that information to the user, to the person who has to make decisions, the person who needs to be aware of certain things, certain processes that are happening. I think a key component of a digital twin is that I missed earlier, is that it should give you a very clear understanding of what's happening in that particular moment. So the real time or quasi real time component is a very important part of the definition of a digital twin, because without it, you don't really have a digital twin from my perspective. Another thing that I think causes confusion in the industry is that because people have a digital replica of their facility or the infrastructure or the construction site, they think that they have a digital twin. And as useful as having that can be, that is not a true digital twin. So you might have a BIM model, and because you see the walls, you see all the conduits, you see the underground infrastructure, that doesn't mean that you have a digital twin. If you connected those, the BIM model, and you also saw how the water is flowing on the pipes, if you have any electrical issues, how space is being utilized, then you would have a digital twin.
Sounds like making a digital twin can be done if you have a BIM of your building, just turning it into like a living BIM. Is that kind of one way to think about it?
Yes. So people in the industry, the people that I work with, they refer to it as having a living, breathing building, for instance, when it comes to a digital twin of a building. And I think that's a great way of referring to it, because it's very relatable.
Two things that I want to get into from there. One is how I guess my assumption is this is an investment and you probably need certain requirements to make this really valuable for you as a client. One might be size of project or size of building, like, and you need to want to be able to monitor everything dynamically as things are happening, and so there is an investment involved. Can you talk about just like size of project or scale that kind of motivates clients? We need a digital twin now.
Clients are faced with the scenario where they have to do more with less. That is true for the client that I'm working with right now. And as I talk with other people in similar situations, different owners, they are in the same scenario. They have constraints in terms of budget. That the budget is shrinking, so they need to be able to do what they do, or even more, even with less resources. So they are being pushed to actually modernize the way they do things. And when you dig into their current operations and the current way of managing and dealing with issues, I'm going to focus on facilities because that's the topic that I'm focused on right now. There are a lot of inefficiencies. And I say this with no criticism. It's just the way it is. And unless there's a trigger that motivates a change for doing things, then the change is not going to happen. So in terms of what's needed, what motivates owners is that need of being able to do more with less. Some owners really want to be on the forefront of what's possible technologically speaking. They want to be able to do, they just want to be more efficient. They just don't want waste. They just don't want to be the owner who is, allowing a lot of inefficiency to continue happening. So they want to change and they want to implement technology because we have amazing technology out there that can be really used. But yes, there is an investment required, and there's an investment not just from a budget standpoint, there's an investment from senior leadership because a lot of this change needs to be motivated and championed by someone at the top, because without that support, I can tell you that, nothing really happens. And I'm not saying that this technology should be pushed into the people who actually do the work, but it should be a collaboration. It should go from the top down, but also it needs to be worked from the bottom up, because at the end of the day, the technicians who are using a digital twin, the facility managers, like they are the ones who know what they're struggling with. And for instance, that's what we did on the digital twin project that I'm involved with right now. They allowed us to talk to the technicians, and they have very few technicians on campus, and they very kindly let us interview them for a number of hours last year, and it was super valuable for everybody. But yeah, there's an investment from a time standpoint that I think is necessary.
You alluded to something that I love about this is my hope for it too, which is, yes, there's an investment monetarily and you got to buy in, but the reason to do it is, like you were saying, if you want to do more with less, technology can help us. So really there is a return on this investment. Sometimes I bet it's very tangible and you can prove it. Sometimes it's less tangible. I want to talk about both of those possibilities in terms of just, do the people at the bottom start to love this digital twin because they can do more on less time? They can get home to their families quicker. Do the people at the top love it because they're seeing dashboards of things that they care about and able to remove roadblocks before they come up? So can we get into some specifics of what becomes valuable for people as they adopt a digital twin?
Sure. So for the people with the boots on the ground, I think it's really helpful because it just saves them a ton of time doing very tedious work. So at a previous company, I worked on actually developing a digital twin. We were developing a digital twin for water utilities. And when we started learning about what the issue was, because the twin, what the twin did was to find leaks in water distribution systems. And when we had conversations with water utilities and we talked with some of the technicians that were on the field, they could spend days looking for a leak. And that means going with an acoustic sensor, listening to the ground to see if there's a noise that could lead, could be a leading indicator that there's a leak there. So if you think about a water distribution system, sometimes it's miles and miles and miles and miles
Mm-hmm.
long, right? So it's a very tedious and grateful job. And when you have a tool like this, you have a light that pops up in your screen. Hey, there's a problem here. They just go there and fix it, right? So I think for people on the ground, it's very valuable in that way. And then for people at the top, I mean, when you are in the position of making decisions, what is something that is the most helpful for you to have? So people want to have good information to make decisions with. And when you have a digital twin that actually displays everything or almost everything that you can possibly see from your facility or from your job site, you can make better decisions. So I think it gives the comfort of understanding what is happening, what are the impacts of the decision that you need to make, right? So I think it's super, super valuable. I think in terms of ROI, to the first part of your comment there, ROI has become my favorite topic because it's something that we talk a lot about in the build infrastructure, right? So when I was working as an engineer, there was always the cost benefit analysis that was done before any project was actually built. And so there's methodologies to evaluate that in that scenario because it's very deterministic. But with new technology, you can only estimate what you're going to get out of it. And I think the owners that are willing to take that leap of faith and actually go with implementing technology, and I'm not saying that they should go and implement a very complex thing everywhere, but they could start small, start realizing value, and then go from there. I think that'd be a very wise approach if they wanted to implement new technologies and be able to do more with less.
Do you think you could be specific about how you could start small? Because my understanding too is just the prerequisite of this is you need a 3D model of your building. Is that true?
Well, for buildings, I think that might be true. You can do twinning with something more simple than a beam model, but I think the best practices recommend that you start with a beam model because, it's more intuitive to use. And at the end of the day, what you want for your people is to use it. If you create a tool that it works but it's not intuitive, people cannot really see very clearly where the problem is, then they're not going to use it. So you know it's worth going the extra mile to getting that beam model right first before you actually implement the analytics on top of it.
Yeah, totally. How have you seen this stuff evolve over the time that you've been, and where do you see it heading? Big question, I guess.
Sure. Before I answer that question, I
No,
have
please.
another comment on the previous question. So on the digital twin that we were working on for water utilities, we didn't need a BIM model, but you had to have an idea of what the water distribution network looked like. Because at the end of the day, you need a layer that you can relate to. You need to understand what you're seeing. That's all I'm trying to say. And in buildings, a BIM model is the right way to go. But if you are modeling a process, you don't need to have a very clear representation of the pipes and their diameters and all that, just
Mm,
perfectly represented in a 3D. You can just have the lines. And as long as that is similar to the manufacturing process that you might be twinning or the water distribution network that you might be working on, that's good enough.
nice. Yeah, so just in the short time that this has been around, or at least from my perspective, it's grown a lot. What have you seen change, and where do you see it heading?
So I think the technology has been there, or the concept of a digital twin has existed for a while, right? Think now. So maybe a good way of explaining it would be to describing what the ultimate state of a digital twin as we see it now is. So the ultimate most advanced digital twin possible is the cognitive digital twin. What that means is that you have a system that is autonomous, that you don't even need to interact with. There's no human in the loop needed. It works well enough that you can trust it so that it actually runs everything on its own. So it's like, okay, imagine that you have a building and it's starting to get too hot and the system detects it. So it opens up the shafts or starts the HVAC system at the right place or at the right time so that the rooms cool off. So that would be a cognitive digital twin. You don't need a human to actually see, oh, it's getting too hot here. Let's start this other, system so that, that is where I think we are going. And from my understanding, that doesn't exist yet. And we are heading that way. And even though it doesn't exist, I think there's companies who are striving to get there. But right now, it doesn't, it only exists at a theoretical level.
Yeah. It's been theorized a lot. It sounds like what we've been talking about forever is like a smart building, a building that actually can handle everything for you. Before you know you're too cold, it's already made it a little bit warmer in the room or whatever. That's like a dream for building owners, right? What do you think the big hurdles are to get there? Is it cost?
I think there's several things. One is of course the cost, because you might need a lot of sensors or a lot of systems that are working correctly all the time. And as we know, the systems are just not perfect. They fail, like the sensors fail. And also you might need a long enough time series of each of the pieces of information that you are collecting, the type of information that you are collecting, in order for your system to actually work at a cognitive level. So that's the tech wise. I think it's more the hardware than the analytics piece. To be honest.
Can we get into that? Because, like, I understand kind of Internet of Things and sensors we can put in buildings, but do you want to talk some specifics about what this building needs to be retrofitted for to have a digital twin?
Yeah, I mean, new buildings are designed in order to house smart technology, smart sensors. All buildings aren't, as we know. So the older the building, so the less ready the building is to have this type of technology, the harder might be to implement something like this. But it's definitely not impossible. There's a lot of new companies coming up that have sensors that solve a very specific problem. So, for instance, going back to the leaking problem, the water leaking problem, there's very small sensors that you can place at strategic points in your building that when they get a little bit wet, they can trigger an alarm and say, hey, there's water in this area. And imagine that it's close to a control room. When there's electrical systems, obviously you don't want any water near there, right? So it can prevent a bigger issue. So I think the technology is growing a lot. The sensors are getting cheaper, they work better, they fail less. I think trust is a big component of any new, when owners need to decide on implementing on a new technology. I think they want to trust the system. They want to hear about success stories from others. And what they encounter is that because it's so new, sometimes there's no a satisfactory answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, sometimes it's a leap of faith, not what we are accustomed to listen to, but sometimes somebody has to decide, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to learn along the way, and I'm willing to be better on the other side of it because of it.
The application I like the most, or for creating some urgency around why we should have digital twins, are the life safety ones. I don't know if you agree, and I don't know if this is far, but I was watching at the InnoActive Future Tech event that Sean and I went to. They had a robot that was kind of like a Roomba that would just explore your building, and it was taking in all kinds of air quality sensory data, like including, I'm sure it can detect smoke and any kind of thing that could kill a person in a building. It can detect all that. I would think this might be an example of something that will help owners be like, you know what, if we can save lives with the digital twin, then we need to pull the trigger. Do you agree? Is there applications for that already?
The application. So instead of talking about applications, because I think the market is big, right? So I think talking about use cases is something that I feel more comfortable with. I think definitely, I mean, owners care about the people that use the buildings. Like, for instance, with the client that I'm working with right now, like, they are a community college Of course they care about the people that are in the buildings. They are responsible for what happens to them when they are in the buildings. Someone who is at a construction site, obviously the owner of that construction site, they care about the people that are working there. So anything that has to do with life safety, I think, is huge. When it comes to industrial processes, like as I mentioned, a construction site, I think there's a very clear liability path that might also be motivating owners to take action. In a place where it's less clear, maybe there's not such a clear path. But I think definitely, I think is the ownership, like wanting people to be safe is one motivator, but also the liability components to it. I think it's another one.
Also, I wanted to make sure that I understood it correct. Is a digital twin is mainly valuable after the building's been built, right? Is that true? It's kind of starts when the building's already constructed.
You can have a digital twin of the construction site.
Would there be would there be value in that?
I think so. It depends on how long the construction takes. If it's a very short term construction, very short construction, maybe you don't need one. Maybe it's an overkill to have a digital twin. But if you are building something for a number of years, you might want to consider doing that
That's a good point.
specific specific things that you might want to monitor.
Do you think we need AI to help us with digital twins eventually? Like some of the stuff you've been saying makes me think AI will help.
Absolutely. So in order to reach that cognitive digital twin status, AI is essential. And one thing that digital twin owners implementing digital twins are doing is to make sure that they collect data, historical data that is consistent. They create a central database of all the information that they've been collecting from across their facilities, across their buildings, to make sure that they can feed analytics that use AI, because AI needs, as you know, time series in order to do the analytics that they do. So
It's
essential,
awesome.
fundamental. Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Can we get into, just because I feel like we've kind of gotten to what I wanted to, do you mind talking about what got you excited about technology, maybe the very beginning as a kid, and how you kind of journeyed to the place you are now? Do you mind giving a version of your backstory?
Absolutely. As a kid, I think I was interested in science. I cannot say that I was interested in technology. I was not someone tinkering with breaking things apart like many people do. I wasn't that person, but I was interested in science. I loved math. I loved astronomy, like the space, like that fascinated me. And that got me into learning more about science and technology in general. That's what led me to study civil engineering. I think my connection with tech started when I got my first job. So my first job was at the Polytechnic University of Madrid, and I was one of the two first people who actually joined that group. So the group was a new chair that had been founded at the university with some public funding, with some private funding, in order to revamp a physical modeling laboratory at the university. So this is a very, very big warehouse that had a wave basin and a wave flume. And these facilities had been completely unoperated for years. And so the university said we have these assets, we're not using them for research, we're not using them to give back to the public, right? So let's clean them up, let's undust them, let's get new equipment. And so I was one of the two first people starting up that new group at the university. And the reason I'm saying this is because wave modeling and physical modeling requires a lot of data analytics. It requires that you actually, so what you do is like a big swimming pool, right? That has paddles on one end that generate waves with a specific frequency following a specific spectrum. And then what you do is you put probes along the way to measure what the input is, and then you measure the effect on the breakwater, or you measure the agitation on the docking area. And so I had to learn how to code, and I had to learn about signal processing. When I was doing I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing, literally. And through that experience, I started getting into it. And we use a lot of pretty cool small sensors to monitor all types of things. And then we had to do, analytics to convert that, into real time, because there's a scale conversion between a small physical model into what that means at a real scale. Because just to be clear, we were modeling a specific port facilities. So these inputs, this information that we were producing was going to be used for the actual design of a breakwater or of a pier or of a new port. It requires a lot of tinkering with sensors and time series and doing a statistical analysis of things. I got very much into evaluating risk into the built infrastructure. And actually, part of my dissertation that I did when I was there is related to that, evaluating vulnerability and risk and probabilities in the construction of this type of facilities.
I feel like there's some good advice in there for young people, just like, because I don't know if you were intentional about this is the direction I want to go, but it sounds like you just kind of fed your curiosity and you got curious about something and you dug in. Is that advice you'd give? Yeah.
Yeah, I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, Some people have it very clear. Some people know, hey, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a stay at home mom. I just didn't know what I wanted to be. And I just followed my intuition and also the opportunities that presented to me. And I'm like, I learned something about this.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start going down a path and then you learn, but you don't like it, and then you change. And that's the beauty of trying new things, that you can always change.
And I'm sure you're one of those people too that just gets obsessed with a problem and wants to solve it. Is that true?
Tell me about it. Just last week I started to I was trying to do an automation, and it's not working yet, but it will. And I obsessed about it. I was spending way too much time doing that. But
I
yeah.
think that's an important quality. And yeah, I wonder too if we could talk quickly just because I'm relatively new. I don't know how new you are to InnoActive Group, but let's talk about what we think a good company culture is. Like what kind of people do you like to work with? I'm just curious.
The people I like to work with is people who are transparent. I want to know, what people are thinking, because if you don't know what people are thinking, you cannot act accordingly. And if you are in a leadership position and you have direct reports, you want to know what people are thinking, because otherwise you cannot really help them succeed. If you don't know what they're struggling with, you cannot remove those roadblocks. So, and the same goes for leadership, people who are at the top. I think it's important to understand, how the company is doing and what are the reasons why we're doing, what we're doing. And if you're not doing something right, like I value feedback, because obviously I want to do a good job. So I think transparency is at the top of my value, the list of my values.
And it reminds me too, I just think I'm going to circle back around to digital twin because that's what we started on. But communication is one that I think of. I feel like you're alluding to it, but just how do we talk about projects? How do we make sure everybody's idea is heard? And it makes me think about the value in a digital twin to like facilitate communication for a team around a building. Like, I bet that's one of the things you've seen really help project teams is like now we can talk about these things because we have a visual and we have some levers to pull. But yeah, is that part of a digital twin? Is it a communication tool?
100%.
Can you give me more?
Yes. It's a communication tool in that it brings information from different parts of the same reality that normally are dominated by different people. Now, something brings all that information together, and then they can have a discussion, because before a digital twin, there were silos. And the person who was taking care of the HVAC system only saw the HVAC system. And the person having to book rooms for a certain class only saw the rooms, but now they can talk and they can say, hey, there's a problem in this class, you need to come and fix it. And and so you're done doing this work on this class so that I can book it, and I can optimize the use of spaces, for instance. So definitely it's a communication tool. And also when you have a digital twin that can display analytics, you can ask yourself questions, you can ask your team questions, you can say, oh, why are we seeing so many errors here? Why is this system or this thing failing so much? We had to repair it 5 times over the last 2 months. Should we replace it now because we are spending so much time doing this? So I think it's definitely a tool that facilitates communication with the ultimate purpose of functioning better.
Also, transparency too. You mentioned that. It just makes me think about a digital twin. Now you're seeing the leak before the mold even comes. Like you're seeing all the problems happen earlier, so there's transparency around. Unfortunately, you probably know more about your building. Like I think about my home, it was built in the phase and it's got foundation issues that I don't even know about. I'm aware because the drywall is cracking everywhere. So I just think sometimes we don't really want to know what's wrong with our buildings. Like in my case, I don't really want to know everything that's wrong with my house. But if we were able to see those things earlier, it's bad news to get, but we want to get it because it's going to save us money down the line. That seems like kind of the mission statement of a digital twin. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, when you have a solution that tells you everything that's not working, when you already have a very long list of problems that you need to address. Imagine that you are a maintenance technician, right? You don't even have hours on a day. You know that you are never going to be able to finish the list, addressing all those things in that list. And the list keeps growing every day. It can be overwhelming if there's even more stuff added to your plate. But I think that could be something that could be used by leadership to say, hey, we might need temporary help in order to catch up with our backlog, right? And then start clean or almost clean as much as possible. So again, it's a conversation. It's a good communication tool because even though it surfaces bad news, it helps you make the decisions to actually solve that situation.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for coming on. I want to do more as we start to work more on projects together. Maybe we can highlight some stuff, but really thank you for coming on and talking to me about digital twins as I'm trying to learn about them. And if people want to reach out to you, I always offer LinkedIn, but do you want to offer somewhere else for people to find you?
I think LinkedIn is great. I monitor it regularly. So, yeah, that's perfect.
Cool. Find Rebeca Gomez on LinkedIn, and I'll even probably tag her in a post, so you'll be able to find her easy. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth.